There are 7 different ways to pursue financial independence and allow you to retire early. One of those ways allowed me to quit my job at age 32, sell everything I own, and travel around the country in an RV with my family for 2.5 years. But there are 6 others that I also want to share with you that can allow you to live life on your terms. Some let you stop investing forever. Others let you just buy some time back with the ones that you love. And others can help you retire decades before your peers. So let's break down the 7 different types of FIRE strategies, financially independent, retired early strategies, so you can find one that fits your lifestyle best. All right, first up on our list is my personal favorite. It's called Coastfire. The name comes from being able to coast to retirement because you have enough invested that if you never put another penny in the market, you'll still have enough by the time you want to retire. So this is a personal one for me because at age 32, I had about $100,000 invested in my retirement accounts. And I realized if I never put another penny in, I'll have over $2.5 million by the time I wanted to retire. So I actually used that information to quit my job, sell our house, and use the home equity to travel around the country in an RV for a couple of years, knowing that my retirement was set. And I've made a bunch of videos on it. I'll link some up here and down below on how things have been going over the last 7 years since I did quit my job. But suffice to say, Coastfire helped give me my life back. So an example of Coastfire would be, let's say you're age 30. If you have $87,000 between your Roth IRA and your 401k accounts, and you only need about $2 million to retire, if you never invest another penny from age 30 to age 65, and you get the average stock market return of about 10%, you would have that $2 million available by the time you wanted to retire, even if you never put another penny in. So technically, you would be Coastfire at age 30, which would be 35 years of never having to invest again. What would you do with that kind of freedom? For me, like I said, I quit my job, but Coastfire to me unlocks that first huge level of financial independence and freedom in your life. So I'm a big fan of Coastfire. In fact, I made an entire calculator. You can grab it for free. There's a link below. But basically, you can put in your age, your investment return, your current investment balances, and your desired FIRE number, how much you need to retire, and it'll tell you how far you are along the journey. And if you say, here's how much I can invest every month, it'll tell you when you're going to hit that Coastfire number. So again, you can grab it, link below. All right, next up on our list is called Slowfire. Now, Slowfire is a bit similar to Coastfire, but the idea is that you enjoy the journey to financial independence instead of trying to race and sprint to the finish line. You don't want to work 70 hours a week for the next 15 years so you can retire at age 38. You want to work 30 hours a week and still get to financial independence in your 50s, being intentional with your money, still having a good savings rate, but not needing to pursue more just for the sake of trying to get to financial independence sooner. And I have really good friends. They're called the Pioneers. I'll link their YouTube channel below. They're amazing. But on their website, they have a definition of Slowfire here, which they say, when someone utilizes the incremental financial freedom they gain along the journey to financial independence to live happier and healthier lives, do better work, and to build strong relationships. I love that because we're talking about numbers here, but what we're really talking about is lifestyle, relationships, and prioritizing things over money, using money as a tool to live a better, happier, healthier life. So that's what I loved about the idea of Slowfire. Now, again, their journey, they documented on the YouTube channel, but it came down to working a stressful job that affected their mental health. And eventually they had to step back and realized they were going to take a long sabbatical and then maybe only return part-time because they didn't need to. They had saved diligently, they had invested well, and then they used that financial freedom of their smart money moves in their 20s to gain some financial freedom in their 30s. And so Slowfire to me is just a really cool approach and mindset of not pursuing just to pursue, not trying to get more just to get more, but to enjoy the journey to financial independence. So like an example of that could be, let's say you make really good money, you make over $100,000 a year, and you're saving 40% of your income, and you're sprinting toward financial independence, but you're burning out and you need an exit plan. Slowfire could be the off-ramp to that exit plan. Maybe instead of saving 40% of your income, you start saving 20. And instead of saving 40 grand a year, you save 20,000 a year. But you can still get to financial independence in your 50s if you invest that $20,000 a year. You could still end up with, $1.5 million to $2 million by the time you're in your late 50s or early 60s. So you don't have to race to the finish line. You can still get there, but dial things back a bit and take control of your life, slow things down, and enjoy the journey. All right, next up on our list is Barista FIRE. Now, Barista FIRE has got a funny name, but it's the idea that you want to quit your job, but you don't quite have enough invested to live on just your investments alone. Now, again, the FIRE movement is really built around this 4% rule, which I have a whole video on how that whole thing changed. I'll link it up here. I'll link that down below. But the 4% rule says you can live on 4% of your investments and then inflation adjust that going forward every single year. Now, if you have $1 million invested, for example, you could pull down $40,000 a year, but maybe $40,000 is not enough to live on. But if you only need $60,000 a year to live on, maybe you can quit your job that you hate, tell your boss to shove it, and then go get a job at Starbucks. The idea is you want to still have benefits. So something where you're like part-time, 20 hours a week, and you get something like Starbucks, they'll give benefits to part-time workers. And with tips, maybe you make 15 to 20 bucks an hour, but you only need to work about 20 hours a week to get that 20,000 extra. So you pull 40,000 from your investments, you pull 20,000 from your barista job, and now you're financially independent. At least you've removed the handcuffs of your corporate hellhole job that you've been wanting to walk away from. So Barista FIRE is a popular idea. I don't know of a lot of people that have walked that path, but I guarantee there are enough people that have maybe not become an actual barista, but they downshifted. They went to part-time work hours and they realized, okay, I can pull from my investments and I can supplement that with some part-time work that I actually enjoy that doesn't make me want to jump off cliff. And now I really have that feeling of financial independence, even though I haven't quite hit that milestone. So again, an example could be, let's say you're working a job and you're making really good money and you need to live on $50,000 a year, but your investments just hit that $1 million milestone. You can only pull 40,000. So if you only need 10,000 extra dollars per year to live on, you could get a part-time job, working at local Starbucks or a coffee shop or a coffee stand somewhere, serve people great drinks, enjoy it, and just pull in $10,000 a year. And maybe that's 15 hours a week and you don't really care how much you make because you enjoy the time. It's what you would be spending time doing anyway, enjoying coffee with friends. And then you are Barista FIRE. You are financially independent from that old job. All right, next up on the list is called Lean FIRE. Now, this is really the one that popularized the entire FIRE movement. And it started with online blogs like Mr. Money Mustache or Early Retirement Extreme. But the idea is to live on very little and you can retire earlier than your peers because you don't need as much. So again, it's based on the 4% rule. And if you have enough invested that you could pull 4% of your money out per year, then you are fully financially independent. But these people aren't spending $50, $60, $70, $80, $100,000 a year. They're living on $30,000 a year or $25,000 a year or less, and they just don't spend money. So Lean Fire is really great for a couple of people. One, people that are aggressive savers, have a really good job, and they want to get out of the rat race in like 10 to 15 years or less. You can save half your income, 70% of your income, just because you don't spend a ton. And it's for people that just basically want to opt out of consumer culture. They don't want to spend money on anything other than stuff that's basically free. And so maybe you are a deal hunter and you've paid off your mortgage. This would be a great case for Lean Fire. It's like you're mortgage free. You spend very little. You optimize every single line item in your budget so that you're spending the least amount possible. You always get deals. You only travel with credit card rewards, right? These are all really cool and good frugal things. Some people could see this as extreme, but if you can get your expenses very, very low, you don't even need $1 million to retire. So for example, if you can get your annual expenses down to $30,000 a year, the 4% rule says you only need $750,000 invested to be Lean Fire. So again, Lean Fire is, in my opinion, not quite fully financially independent because you are dependent on living this lifestyle for the rest of your life. But if that's the lifestyle you choose and you're comfortable with that, then you're financially independent once you hit that milestone. All right, next up on the list is just traditional FIRE. financially independent, retired early. People that are retiring in their late 40s, mid 50s, that have the ability to save a good chunk of their income. So the FIRE movement is really kind of built on people that have saved up to half their income or more. I would say traditional FIRE kind of now lands in the saving anywhere between 30 to 50% of your income and saving enough that you can retire maybe in the next 15 to 20 years. Now, there's an actual really cool tool that you can plug your numbers into. I wanted to show this with you. It's called Net Worthify, and it's a sort of when kind of retire calculator. But in the example of traditional FIRE, let's say somebody makes about $110,000 a year, but they live on about 80. So they're saving about 30 grand a year. Now, based on it's about 30% of their income. Now, if they get the standard stock market return of 10% and they plan on withdrawing 4%, what this says is they can retire in about 21 years. So if you start making good money and you're 30 years old, you could retire at age 51 if you're saving about 30 to 40% of your income. So traditional FIRE is the path for most people that want to, you know, optimize their career, take advantage of a higher income, save 30 to 50% of their money, and then retire in 20 years or less. All right, the next version of FIRE is known as Fat FIRE. And it's basically the opposite of lean FIRE. It's for the people that don't want to give up the luxuries in life, but they also don't want to work a 40 to 45-year career. They want to retire while they're still young and enjoy all the fun things like luxury travel and dining out and fine clothes and a nice house and maybe a vacation home, right? They want to enjoy the nice things in life, and they don't want to sacrifice those things, but they still want to get there early. So for an example of this would be, let's say somebody spends $200,000 a year. They want to have a $200,000 a year retirement lifestyle. Well, based on the 4% rule, that means they need about $5 million to retire early. Now, not everybody can get to $5 million, just to be perfectly frank. The people that are going to pursue Fat FIRE are people like doctors, high income earners, business owners, and people that can invest $100,000 a year or more to get there. So Fat FIRE, again, think fewer sacrifices, more steak dinners. All right, the last one on the list is Geo Fire, which is kind of a play on geo arbitrage, meaning you move to another country so you don't need as much money to retire. Now, this is very popular in countries like the United States, where people can get a high income job, save a good chunk of money, and then they don't need quite as much if they move to somewhere lower cost like Thailand or Portugal or Mexico, and they find a place to live for maybe even half the cost of what it would normally be to retire in the United States. So, for example, if your retirement lifestyle is going to cost you about $60,000 a year in the United States, but you decide to move overseas and you find that you can live that same lifestyle for $30,000 a year, you need half as much money. So at $60,000 a year, you need $1.5 million to retire. But with Geo Fire, you only need $750,000 to retire. Get there so much faster, but it does require you to move out of the country, and you might cut off relationships with the people you love. So take that with a grain of salt. But if you bring them with you, right? I've seen some fire bloggers that have actually brought their family with them. So it can happen. And a lot of people have an affinity for wanting to move overseas, live a simpler lifestyle. So if that's you, Geo Fire might actually be a really good option. And if you run your numbers, you could probably get there a lot faster than any of these other fire methods. All right, so those are the 7 most popular ways to achieve financial independence, but there are some honorable mentions I want to talk about. Number 1 is Chubby Fire. So Chubby Fire is sort of traditional fire, and Fat Fire had a baby. You got Chubby Fire because it's not quite $200,000 a year lifestyle, but maybe more like $100,000 a year. And you still want to retire early, and you probably got to have a pretty good job to get there, right? Because at $100,000, you need at least $2.5 million or more to be Chubby Fire. But you don't necessarily need the $5 to $10 million that would qualify you for Fat Fire. The next one is called Flamingo Fire. And Flamingo Fire is sort of a mix between Coastfire and Lean Fire, where you're probably 75% of the way toward financial independence, but you really want to dial things back and you don't necessarily want to draw too much from your investments. You still want to retire in the next 10 years, say, but you really want to just have a full lifestyle change. And so Flamingo Fire allows you to maybe move to that tropical place and work a job that just pays the bills, just gets you enough, but you're still going to be able to be fully financially independent in the next couple of years, maybe in the next 10 years. And then finally, there's one called Cash Flow Fire. This is basically for people that are opting out of the traditional path to retirement and want to build a business, such as a real estate rental business or a passive income business that allows them to collect money passively so they don't have to work for it anymore. They built something that pays them, and the cash flow pays for their entire lifestyle. I know there's a guy named Chad Carson. He's known as Coach Carson. Again, if you find him on YouTube, great channel. He achieved this in his 30s where the cash flow from his rental properties paid for his lifestyle. So Cash Flow Fire is for you real estate nuts out there. Financial independence is not a dream anymore. It's a reality for a lot of people, and there's more than one way to do it. So I would love to hear from you. What's your favorite version of FIRE? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear where you're at and what you think of all the different types of FIRE. And if you want to know if you're close to my favorite version of FIRE, which is Coastfire, you can grab a link to the calculator below. Just sign up and I'll send you a copy of it, as well as some videos on how to use that Coastfire calculator. And maybe you're closer than you think. And if you're curious and you want to know all about my Coastfire journey 7 years after I quit my job, I've got an entire video on all the juicy details right here.